What's happening, everyone? I hope you are doing well. In this video, we're going to be going over why your metrics are lying to you. Now, before we get into the video itself, I'm going to reintroduce myself to some of you in case you've not had the displeasure of meeting me yet. I was the ex-head of operations at a company called Imperium Acquisition. If you're not familiar with this, we were basically helping marketing agencies, coaches, consultants, and course sellers either start or scale their own business. During that time, I helped the company scale from 100K a month all the way to 700K a month at its peak. I helped grow the team from a team of 5 to a team of around 40 by the time I left. And across the 4 years I was there, I was also overseeing fulfillment for more than 4,000 clients across every single vertical you can imagine. And above all, I also built systems that help the founder scale without becoming the bottleneck. Now, the purpose of this channel is to essentially help you do the exact same thing. So if you're a 6 to 7 figure, coach, consultant, or entrepreneur, and you're struggling to actually scale without being the bottleneck, or without being handcuffed to the day-to-day runnings of the business, this channel is designed to actually free you from the day-to-day runnings of the business so you can focus on being a visionary. Alongside this, the second purpose is to expand my network beyond the corner of my living room, as it's now just me, myself, and I. And I also want to build goodwill before I inevitably try to sell you something. The game is the game, and I do not apologize for that. Preemptive disclaimers before we get into these, training style videos. My voice is boring as shit. So if you struggle to sleep, this is fantastic for you. Magnesium partnered with this watch. It'll fix your apnea. I'm an absolute rambler. I'm working on it. I've always have been. And also there's no magic fix it, get rich quick pill in these videos. Message me if you find one. I have been searching for 8 years. Now, quotes of the day before we get into the video. Men lie, women lie, metrics lies. Everybody lies. That's why you need to be very, very careful. There's that funny saying where it goes, men lie, women lie, and numbers don't lie. I promise you numbers do lie if you miscontextualize them. So let's get into it. Now, the reason why this video exists to begin with is because as your business scales, the cost of misreading a metric increases. Okay. A number that once gave useful visibility can start creating false confidence when the business becomes more complex, more delegated, more expensive to run, and more dependent on repeatable systems. Here's the thing to actually note as you're watching this. A metric tells you what happened. Context tells you whether you should trust it. So if you're watching this right now and have some sort of wits about you, at least I hope you do, you probably have an understanding of your revenue, of your close rate, of your show rate, of your pipeline, of your churn, your margin, your lead volume, your show rate, your conversion rate. I think I already said show rate, but essentially what I'm trying to get at here, you have an understanding of your metrics, your KPIs, all that good stuff. If you don't know it from the top of your head, that's fine. I'm not going to judge you, but you should have access to spreadsheets which actually give you data across all of the relevant department. Now, the problem, however, is that these numbers often get read way too quickly and without proper context. And therefore, a metric in isolation can be technically accurate and still commercially misleading if you do not understand what created it, what it's hiding, and whether it's strong enough to support the decision being made from it. Okay. So the purpose behind what I'm going to share with you in this video is to help you to stop treating your metrics as foregone conclusions and start treating them as signals that need context before they actually become decision quality. Now, here's what this video covers. Market stage and how this influences everything. This is to do with, what stage your market is in as it dictates your metrics. And if you ignore this, you'll think your business was way better than it actually is. A quick example I can give you here is if you are in a blue ocean market and you are selling something that is extremely hot, your business may be doing way better than it actually is in the context of your metrics because your market is in the stage of romanticism. It's in the honeymoon phase. And that means your conversion rate is going to be higher than usual. Your cost per lead is going to be lower than usual. Your shop rate is going to be higher than usual. People are going to be, turning up to get what you have because they're in the romantic stage. Not much effort needs to be done in your business to yield success. And as a result, your metrics get skewed upwards if you don't take into consideration the market stage because you think you're doing way better than you actually are. What then happens is that when you graduate from this stage and the market matures and the buyers are no longer the same buyers they once were, all of a sudden your metrics take a dip and you start being confused as to why the metrics are so horrible all of a sudden. So that's one of the things we're going to go over. We're also going to go over the difference between a metric and a decision quality metric, because, we're going to isolate why a number is not automatically useful just because it's measurable. The hidden context behind common KPIs, how revenue, close rate, pipeline churn, margin, lead, volume, conversion rate, show rate, and even team performance can all be misread when all viewed in isolation. These are some of the key ones. The principles I'm going to teach you here, you want to apply it to every metric, but I'm going to go over some of the major ones which you will likely make decisions based off of, and therefore it's really important to apply context to these ones in particular. Otherwise, the decisions can literally cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars depending on what scale you operate at. We're also going to go over the conditions that inflates confidence. Things like why founder involvement, warm audiences, financing, urgency, market stage, strict qualification, or even brand trust can make a metric look stronger than what the underlying system really is. Operational risks that metrics can hide, how numbers can conceal cash, pressure, rework, poor fit, weak onboarding, delivery drag, margin leakage, founder subsidy, all of these different things, right, that metrics can actually hide from you. And then the interpretation layer you as a founder need before you actually scale, okay? And this is ultimately asking better questions of the number in front of you before you proceed to make a bigger commitment on a decision level. Now, here's when this becomes relevant for you. This becomes relevant when the business is no longer small enough for you to go off of feeling. And this typically happens when you're north of 30K a month. Okay. So typically beyond the lifestyle business phase and you're heading towards a 7-figure per year role. When you are small, you can get away with a lot. You know which leads were warm. You know which clients were difficult. You know what the monthly, recurring revenue was gained versus what was actually collected, all these different things. This is not clean visibility. It's founder proximity. Okay. Because you're close to the business during this phase, everything on a subconscious level, inside out. If a lead's warm, you'll know if a lead's cold. You know why someone didn't close. You know why the show up rate's this. You have a good understanding of the market conditions because you're still involved in it. Okay. That's just not clean visibility. It's just you being close to everything. Okay. If you're looking to scale beyond the 7-figure realm, right, multi 7 figures and beyond, the above is just not sustainable. Now, here are the different stages in which this video becomes extremely relevant for you. You're making bigger decisions from the same level of reporting. Okay, so the business has more risk attached to each hire, spend increase decision, sales target, delivery change, or even forecast. You're no longer personally close to every result. You can see the number, but no longer know the conditions that produced it. The business feels more complex than the dashboard suggests. The metrics may look fine, but cash capacity, delivery, client quality, or team consistency, it still feels unstable. So the metric looks good on one end, but everything else is falling apart. You need to apply context and see what's really going on here. And you're trying to scale something that has only worked under specific conditions. The result may depend on, founder involvement, warm leads, market timing, narrow audience, financing, whatever it may be. This is where you need to apply context to your metrics, because when you were great, it was probably based on specific conditions. When you start to take a dip, the metrics take a dip. And if you don't know why that is, you need to apply context. And this is a good example. And then finally, you're moving away from founder-led growth into system-led growth, which again happens beyond the whole, lifestyle business phase. Now, here's what you're going to be able to see differently after this. When revenue is not really revenue, okay? Sold, contracted, invoice collected, recognized, retained, profitable revenue, they're not the same thing, especially in the info space, because it's like the Wild West and there's a lot of, young cowboys entering the realm where they're just making a ton of money, right, by being wonderful at what they do. They assume money's money when money is not money, okay? There's different types of money to be had, and it's really important that you understand this, as it can make or break your business as you scale. When a strong close rate is not proof of a strong sales system. So this is where the result may be carried by lead warmth, founder trust, financing, urgency, qualification, proof, or market timing. And that's why you want to actually, look beyond the close rate in isolation and, not be misled by it. You also be able to look at your pipeline differently, because your pipeline, believe it or not, it's not a forecast. It's an estimation of what you'll potentially yield, provided that what you're seeing in your pipeline is accurate. Because here's the thing, interest, conversations, qualified opportunities, and decision-ready revenues, These are all very different stages of commercial reality, and therefore it's important to actually isolate this. You'll know when churn is not one problem. Client loss may come from fit, expectations, onboarding, value realization, mis-selling, cash pressure, whatever it is, and therefore your churn rate, it will actually have more accuracy beyond the number in isolation. When margin is being protected by the founder, this is a big one. P&L may not show the unpaid judgment, escalation handling, rework, quality control, and the rescue effort that you as a founder put in holding the business model together, which is just not sustainable. When lead volume is not demand, volume only matters if the lead shows up, qualifies, converts, pays, returns, succeeds, all these different things. When team performance is not portable, because someone's result, this is one of my favorite ones. Someone's result may have depended on the input environments, brand trust, management structure, or the systems around them. And to give you a really good example of this is like most of the hires you make, they may be good for the company, but they're not company proof. So what that means is that performance is centered around the conditions your company sets. The issue with that is that the hire in question is not maximizing their ability to perform in their specific role. So one of my personal goals at Imperium that I've achieved is to be Imperium proof. So that's why I looked beyond our company and acted as an operator and learned about operations beyond just doing it for our company. Because here's the thing with operations, for example, it's different with every single company with the same underlying principles. But in terms of the systems, in terms of the design, it's tailored to the actual founder. That's why in my role, the reason why I was able to do so well is not only because I was able to operate in alignment with the conditions that were laid out in Imperium, but I made an intentional effort to be Imperium proof so that I can step in other businesses and operate a high level in them as well. The issue here is that sometimes your team members that perform as good as they are only because of the conditions you set. A key example are your closers. You may think your closers are good when in reality, they're just relying on warm leads and financing. You put them in another pod, it all goes downhill, and I've seen that firsthand. And then finally, you'll learn when early traction's not proof of a scalable market, because again, novelty, timing, founder reputation can create a temporary romantic stage that does not behave the same way later. Now, here's the decisions this should help you avoid. It should help you avoid hiring too early. It should help you avoid scaling paid acquisition too quickly. And by the way, guys, you can pause the video and you can go over the doc to read in more detail here. It can help you avoid misdiagnosing sales performance the wrong way, because again, if close rate moves up or down without, separating lead source, offer maturity, buyer urgency, whatever it may be, it can all be a bit messy. It help you prevent changing delivery for the wrong reason. I was actually speaking to a personal client the other day about this, where he was talking about, he was looking at his churn rate and he was about to change his fulfillment model entirely. But then when I had a one-on-one with him and I actually exposed that his churn rate, when he applies context to it, the 7 problematic, situations he has, it's skewing the metrics because the problems were centered around the client simply not doing the work. Okay. And when you apply that context, you can then do a bit more deeper digging into whether the product can be improved or the accountability, or it's an accountability and the client needs to actually, get their foot out their arse and actually get to work. So again, it's funny this is here because it just shows you how many people, end up doing the wrong thing. Forecasting from an unstable revenue, never do this. Help you prevent overvaluing individual, team performance. Help you prevent committing to scale before the metrics repeatable. And then finally, before we actually get into this, in terms of the metrics, it'll help you understand that the number in isolation is not the dangerous thing. The dangerous thing at hand is the confidence the number creates before the number has earned the confidence from you. And that comes from context. Now, let's ask ourselves why metrics actually break as you scale. Now, as we mentioned at the start of the video, guys, when your business is small, visibility is informal. This means you can talk to the leads, check Stripe, listen to sales calls, speak to clients, feel delivery pressure, whatever it may be, and still have an accurate sense of what is going on. It's not scalable and it's not sustainable, but at that stage, you can get away with it. And I've spoken with many people who choose to get away with it because they're happy with how it's going and they have no sort of ambitions to scale beyond where they want to go, which is perfectly fine. The problem, however, is that when your business grows, the reporting standard often does not grow with it, okay? The founder still sees the number, but you as the founder is no longer close enough to know what each number really means. The usual progression looks like this: founder proximity, informal confidence, more volume, more complexity, weaker context, false confidence, expensive decisions. And when I say expensive decisions, guys, I truly mean expensive decisions, because at the scale we were operating at, when we're spending 100K, 200K, 300K a month on ads across Facebook and Google and YouTube, if we misinterpret sales data, if we misinterpret, fulfillment, our churn rate, the whole thing can blow up, because we can change so many levers in the business, causing us to spend way more than we need to in manpower, in woman power, in ad spend. And again, there would just be no need to have done that. So at a smaller scale, if you guys are watching this, you may think it's okay, where it's like, oh, we'll just spend a couple $100 here, it's fine, it's not costly. Trust me, it will be death by 10,000 cuts, and then when you eventually get to a good point, it's going to start to sting. So just be mindful of this. Now, this is essentially why metrics can start breaking at the exact moment the founder needs them the most. The business has more activity, more reporting, more data, but you as the founder may have less direct understanding of what each number actually means. Now, here's some scaling changes, okay? And this is what happens as you scale up. More lead sources. The close rate and the conversion becomes harder to interpret because not all leads carry the same trust, urgency, or intent. More salespeople. Performance becomes harder to compare because each person may be selling into different inputs, scripts, proof, offers, or audiences, okay? God forbid you do this. If you have a sales team, you want everyone to follow the same framework. Yes, each individual may have their own style about how to execute that framework, but more or less they should have a framework in place that everyone follows. More payment terms. Revenue becomes harder to trust because sold revenue, contracted revenue, collected cash, and recognized revenue separate. This is my favorite topic because everyone tries to get their balls on the table by saying, oh yeah, we do 100K revenue. Okay, what's your cash? Cash is like 30K a month. There you go. It's a completely different story, but some people fool themselves into thinking that they've got a way bigger business than they actually do, especially in the internet marketing and info space, because contracted revenue in this game, it truly is meaningless. That's why you want to work out what your average collection rate is, so that you can actually distinguish how much of that revenue you're actually going to collect. And that's more of an accurate representation to be had in terms of the health of your business. Now, moving along, more clients, you get more clients. Churn and retention becomes harder to diagnose because client fit, onboarding, usage, expectations, and value realization vary. More delivery complexity, margin becomes harder to read because rework, management load, escalation handling, and founder subsidy increase. You're more involved if you don't have the appropriate systems in place. You're less involved when you do get the systems in place, because you'll have people on different, different people on different pods handling fulfillment depending on how your product's structured, right? And if you are involved, you may have different ways of doing things, or if you're not involved, you have it systemized through people, but you don't have context anymore because the people are handling it. And that could lead to, again, metrics being skewed. More pipeline volume. Forecasting becomes harder because interest, intent, urgency, and decision readiness get mixed together. Less founder involvement. Previously strong metrics may weaken because who was originally part of the mechanism that made them strong is no longer part of it. An example is this: when you are, as the founder, closing your sales calls, you are, of course, the face of the business. Their closers or the customers have more familiarity with who you are, meaning that your close rate's going to be naturally higher than your actual closers, okay? And therefore, when you hire a closer, on average, you expect the close rate to naturally dip. Like whenever we advised clients at Imperium, whenever they would hire a closer, the founder would have like a crazy close rate of like 40, not crazy, sorry, it'd be like 60 to 70%. And then when we, get them to bump up their pricing, you'll naturally pivot to like the sweet spot of 40%. When they bring in a closer, we always set the expectation that, the closer, they may on average fall between the 20 to 30% mark at that set price point. But that's because there's less involvement and, you as the face of the brand are no longer in sight. Now look, here's the thing. The bigger the business gets, the less useful a surface level number becomes on its own, okay? And this doesn't mean the metrics become less important. It just means interpretation becomes more important. Context needs to be had. Now here's the mistake most of you will make as founders. You essentially, well, the number one, as you're watching this, I hope you're tracking your numbers to begin with. But here's the thing, if you are tracking the numbers, and even if you aren't tracking the numbers, that's not necessarily the key mistake that I'm going to be going over here. A lot of you right now, you're tracking way too much already, okay? You've got dashboards, you've got spreadsheets, you may have CRM views, you may have sales reports, you may have finance sheets, you may have delivery trackers, you may have weekly scorecards. The problem is that more reporting does not automatically mean more clarity. Sometimes it gives you as the founder more things to look at while still not answering the real question. The common mistake is using metrics to feel reassured before actually using them to diagnose what is actually happening. This shows up when you as a founder, you treat the metric as the answer instead of asking what produced the number and whether these conditions are repeatable. You compare numbers across unequal contexts, as if leads, salespeople, clients, offers, markets, and delivery models are automatically comparable when they're not. You make permanent decisions from temporary performance, especially when the result depended on timing, novelty, founder involvement, or even a narrow source of demand, okay? You confuse activity with strength. You're assuming more leads, more calls, more pipeline, more revenue or more reporting means that the business is becoming more scalable. You look for another dashboard when the real issue at hand is judgment. Adding more reporting instead of improving the quality of interpretation, which will cause more confusion and will do more harm to your business than good. Now, the operating principle for this video is simple. A metric is a signal, okay? It only becomes useful when you as the founder understands the context, constraint, and the decision attached to it. Now, here's the metric context architecture that I want to go over here. And this is basically the simplest way to read metrics properly, as you want to do it in a way in which you put it through a context layer before you make a decision based off of it. And this is the architecture as it follows. Number, source, conditions, constraints, repeatability, and decision, okay? And this is the lens that should sit behind every meaningful KPI in the business. Now, if we go through these layers one by one, this is essentially what it covers. Number, what does the metric say? It gives you the surface level signal. Source, where did the result come from? Lead source, client segment, person, channel, or offer context, it completely changes the meaning. Conditions, what made this result possible? Financing, urgency, founder involvement, market timing, brand trust, proof, all of these things can inflate results. Constraint, what's the metric not showing? Every metric hides something. Cash, workload, quality, margin, founder labor, risk, or even a future obligation. Repeatability, would this hold if volume increased, if you as the founder stepped back, or if the market changed? This then separates temporary performance from scalable performance when you look at the metric. And then decision, is this metric strong enough to support the decision being made from it? And the reason why this matters is because the bigger the decision, the more context your metric needs. Again, coming back to the example at Imperium, when we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on ads, looking at metrics on isolation, it's not good enough. A significant context needs to be done. Now, the most important question you can ask yourself is, would I still trust this number if the conditions that created it changed? If it's a no, the metric itself is not useless, but it should not be treated as proof. It should be treated as a signal that needs further investigation. Now, here are the metrics that create the most false confidence if you misread, okay? And these are the most dangerous ones because you as a founder will use these metrics to justify bigger scaling decisions. So again, it can literally cost you a lot of money if you get this wrong. Now, these are the main ones. Revenue. Revenue shapes confidence, hiring, spending, forecasting, identity. But as we discussed previously, it's often not separated into sold, contracted, collected, and therefore it makes a business look way bigger than it actually is. Okay. Close rate. This is used to judge sales strength, offer quality, hiring decisions, but it's heavily affected by lead source, seller, financing, warmth, and even market conditions. Pipeline value. It can make future revenue feel safer than it is, even when the deals are not qualified, urgent, decision ready, or cash capable. Churn and retention. Founders often treat churn as a service verdict and retention as a proof of satisfaction when both require deeper diagnosis. Literally the example that I gave you of a client that I spoke to the other day, where he was literally feeling down in the dumps. He was about to flip his entire fulfillment model, and I saved him from jumping off the cliff because, again, making these significant changes based off of, data without context is the equivalent of jumping off a cliff. Now, the next one, gross margin profit, could look healthy whilst hidden founder labor, rework, management drag, and delivery complexity are not properly, costed for, okay? If your margin is extremely high, this is something to note, especially for you guys that are probably running a one-man or one-woman band, and you're thinking, yeah, my profit's great. There's always a level of pain associated with that pain or with that verbiage, depending if you're looking to scale to multi-seven figures. Because your margin shouldn't be extremely high if you're looking to achieve that. Because if it is, you're typically buried under a lot of work and dependency on your end, where without you, the business can't run, okay? And this is usually an identity thing where, again, revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, right? But at the same time, profit can evolve into vanity if you as the founder are holding on to lots of profit and are choosing to hold on to it whilst continuing to work like 100-hour weeks and whatnot, which again, you don't want. Lead volume, CPL, it can create the illusion of demand while the actual lead quality, buying intent, and downstream profitability are actual weak. At a time where we had like an insane volume of leads, closers were having sales calls with all sorts of people. Like there was a time where one of our closers, Vince, he was having a sales call with someone that wanted to sell jukeboxes. And, as good as we are, we can't, make miracles, I say we, of course, as good as we were, okay, as I'm no longer there, but you get the point. We can't work miracles, but on paper, it looks like, yeah, lead volume's great, but what's the quality of those leads, Show rate can be misread as prospect commitment without looking at lead source, reminder process, qualification, perceived value. Conversion rate can be treated as funnel proof without understanding traffic quality, of offer awareness, market stage, buying intent. Team performance. Personal results can be credited to the individuals and under attributed to the environment that enabled the outcome. Are you a good closer because you're a stud of a closer, or is it because of the environments of the business itself where you can only close warm leads on a good offer with financing in place? And that's the most easiest example I can give you to paint a picture in mind. Early demand, market traction. It can look like durable validation when the business is still benefiting from novelty, timing, urgency, or founder reputation. A real-time example of this at the time of me recording this, which is 11th of June 2026, is the AI market. You stick AI at the end of anything, it will probably sell. And then what would happen is you think you have great business, great numbers, when in reality is heavily dependent on the market conditions that it lies upon. Okay. Now, one thing to reiterate, the goal is not to stop tracking these metrics. The goal is to stop trusting them before they have been contextualized. Now, let's do a metric deep dive now. Metric deep dive. So this is where we're going to be going over in full detail all these dangerous metrics, guys, because as mentioned, these ones are the ones that you'll typically use to justify bigger scaling decisions. So I'm going to go over each one and how each one can lie to you and how you can actually avoid being lied to then save you a ton of money. So revenue. Revenue is the money generated by the business, which needs to be separated by contract value, collected cash, payment plan completion, recognized delivery value, retained revenue, and profitable revenue. Okay. The purpose behind this is to understand whether the business is actually becoming stronger and not just larger on paper. Now, the reason why this matters is because revenue is often the metric that creates the most confidence for you as a founder. It influences hiring, spending, forecasting, team targets, your personal identity, and the founder's belief that the business is ready for the next stage. Now, here's how revenue can lie to you. It doesn't equal cash. It's often labeled as contract value, yet founders will treat it as cash gospel with the belief that the entire contract value will be collected. In info, this isn't always the case, okay? I was literally responsible for leading the account recovery team at Imperium, where we recovered like north of a million in cash. I think 700K was actually tracked, but prior to that, there was hundreds of thousands that wasn't tracked, which was my fault, as the system wasn't properly refined by myself. But swiftly moving on from that, the point I'm trying to make, right? When I was doing account recovery, I was in shock when we actually started putting metrics and numbers behind the account recovery side of things, because we came to a conclusion that on average across all the payment plans, we would collect about 60% of them. So then we knew whenever we onboarded a client that was on a payment plan, on average, irregardless of what plan they were on, it'd be anywhere between like 60 to 70% that they would actually complete. That's the number that you want to look at, because again, if you treat revenue as cash gospel, depending on how far you extend your payment plans out and whatnot, you could be like, I'll give you an example here. One time we had a client where on paper, he's like, yeah, I run a business that's doing like 30K, but then he's collecting like 7K in cash. Now that is a big difference, in the numbers there. Okay. So, and again, in info specifically, it's the Wild West out here. People simply don't finish their payment plans. Okay. It's just, even with proper contracts, legalities and whatnot, people tend to drop off. It is what it is. And as a result of this, the numbers can be skewed and cash reality can be different. Literally just gave you an example here, but I'll give you another example right here. Founder sells 100K. This is all done via like, payment plans, whatever, collects to it. If they sell 100K via payment plan, they collect 20K up front, remaining 80K expected over the next few months. Okay. This will be a very massive deal. Let's say it's a done for you build, whatever it may be. Some of that may come in cleanly. Some of that payment may be delayed. Some of the payments may fail. Some clients may drop off. Some may cancel. Some may dispute. Some may request a refund, or some may simply never complete the plan. Okay. I'm trying to really drill the point home here that, I think that I gave the example of someone selling one product 100K, which is a massive done for you build. But let's just say they sell 100K's worth of deals across various payment plans across different customers. I'm trying to drill the point home that some clients, they can come in clean. Some clients, they'll fail. Some clients may drop off. Again, when I was leading the account recovery team, I heard every excuse imaginable not to pay. I heard people losing their arms. I heard people losing, their legs, their houses falling apart, their mountains falling apart. They've had to go in hospital all of a sudden. The most convenient one was that every time payment was due, something happened to a family member. And it tends to happen all the time across 4 years of me, leading the account recoveries team. But the point I'm trying to make is that this 100K, not all of it will ever come in cleanly. And you really want to factor that in, when you're looking at revenue. Now, this is the next part here. Even when factoring what you end up collecting on average, the collected cash isn't always the answer, okay? You still have to actually deliver the service, retain the client, protect margin, avoid refunds, all of which without you absorbing the pressure. This is very integral when it comes to like marketing agencies, because again, if you got them on a rolling retainer, you got to make sure that you deliver upon month on month for that cash to actually be locked safe and sound, depending if you have like a guarantee attached to it or whatever it may be. Okay. Otherwise you'll assume the cash is yours once it's landed. And I hate to break it to you, even when the cash is in the bank, it's never yours, especially when you've attached to a promise, to your offer. The promise needs to be delivered and then the cash is yours. And in true operator fashion here, I'm going to break your hearts. Even when the promise is delivered and the cash is in your bank, sometimes it still runs the risk of not being yours, as the client can still dispute if they're not happy for God knows whatever reason. Okay. It happens, and there are protocols you can use to prevent that. And that's something we can look into in another video. Now, here's the mistake that founders typically make. Because contract value looks strong, you start acting bigger and you start scaling very dangerously, whilst cash collection and delivery reality has not caught up. Revenue can make your business feel bigger before it actually has become stronger. The reason why founders do this is because you as a founder feel that the contract value feels clean. Okay. It gives you a clear scoreboard. It makes sales momentum visible. It looks good in screenshots. You're able to, talk about it in a call. You're able to go over it through team meetings, launch recaps, sales reports, forecasts. It's also the number that many founders have been trained to celebrate. Okay. Now, for me, transparently speaking, I don't give a toss about revenue. I'm biased because, again, I ran the account recovery team, and in our specific industry, in the info space, especially in a niche like ours, where it's like B2C, B2B, and you got the middle line, which is B to wannabe, it's never 100% accurate. That's exactly why, with my who I am and my all the things I've achieved and whatnot, I only speak in cash. Okay, because that's all I care about. Revenue, it's just it looks way better than it actually is. Okay, but as a founder, you naturally feel like the man or the woman. You're like, yeah, we had a 100K month, and then in reality, you collected 30K in bloody cash. Like, what are we doing here? Okay, so. And I'm being serious, but I am teasing here at the same time. It's just naturally the numbers that a lot of founders have been trained to celebrate. Now, to be fair, and to look at the other side, contract value does matter. But once people are signing, the next question isn't just how much did we sell, but how much of what we sold do we actually collect, keep, fulfill, and profit from? That's a completely different question, and it will allow you to make way stronger decisions. The issue at hand is that, as you grow, revenue becomes less simple. More plans, more failed payments, more financing routes, more fulfillment periods, more client types, more refunds, more delivery complexity, more team involvement. I'll give you a real-time example. By the time I had left Imperium, we were offering like 4 or 5 different things. Okay. We had done for you agency, done for you recruitment. We had Nirvana, we had Easy Grow, we had High Ticket Heaven. And we had more payment plans. We had more failed payments. We had a couple of financing options. And then with the financing options, people can get this price and that price. We had more fulfillment periods. We had more client types. All these different things, right? And naturally, at our scale, we did have a couple refund requests that spiked, but that's perfectly normal when you're offering more and you're scaling up as aggressively as we were, okay? All these things make revenue harder to interpret, and therefore what used to be a straightforward number becomes a layered operating signal, okay? Now here's how to actually look at revenue. It should be broken into layers before it's being used for scaling decision. These are the different questions to ask. What was the total contract value sold? This protects you from, not being able to see the actual cash strength of what was actually sold. How much cash was collected up front? It shows immediate cash reality. How much remains on payment plans? Shows future collection exposure. What's the average plan completion rate? Shows how much of the contract value is realistically collectible. How much has been delivered or recognized? It shows whether the business has fulfilled the obligation behind the revenue. How much is retained after churn, refunds, and failed payments? Shows durability. How much is profitable after real delivery cost? It shows whether the growth is strengthening. This is more applicable to you done for you marketing agencies out there, or even if you do like a done for you service in the consulting space. Naturally, you'll need a lot more manpower and sweat equity and the cost of goods and cost of software and all that jazz. If you're in info, it doesn't necessarily apply to you, but you can even still ask this question because you may have CSMs involved and account managers and all these different things, Now, it's a simple calculation is this, okay? Expected collectible revenue equals contract value times average plan completion rate. So if the business sells 100K in contract value and historically collects 72% of payment plan value, the founder shouldn't treat that month as 100K of dependable revenue, okay? They should treat it as roughly of, 72K of expected collection, and then judge that against delivery cost, team cost, tax, refunds, chargebacks, failed payments, and found labor. That's a much safer number to scale from. So for example, on our end, because our average plan completion rate across all payment plans up to a 6pay is 60 to 70%, we will then look at our monthly revenue and assume from this batch, we're going to collect 60% of that. And that's been historically proven accurate based off of thousands of data points. Therefore, whenever we're factoring in, costs, hiring decisions, whatever it may be, we'll go off of that number. Now, the practical fix here, when it comes to decision makings associated around revenue, separate the revenue into at least 5 different views. Contract value sold, what's been agreed, cash collected, my favorite one, what's actually landed, expected collectible revenue, contract value adjusted by average plan completion rate, recognized delivered revenue, what has been fulfilled, profitable revenue, what remains after real cost, including delivery drag and founder involvement. The key thing to remember is that contract value is not cash, cash is not profit, and then revenue is not safe until the plan is completed, the value is delivered, and the margin survives fulfillment. Super important. So that's how to actually interpret revenue. Whenever you look at revenue in order to make a decision without looking at it in isolation, because if you look at it in isolation, it's going to cause serious problems. Let's go to the next one. Close rate. Close rate is the rate at which a certain number of sales calls become paying clients, typically calculated as calls taken dash closed deals. Sorry, I can't speak and we're getting to that point of the video. You can get really freaky with this and factor in qualified calls only and unqualified calls, etc. I see loads of people do this. The problem with this is that it's a prime example of how close rate can skew one way or the other, depending on how you're looking at it, and that's why context is key. Why this matters? Again, it's the metric used to judge salespeople, offer strength, lead quality, sales strips, founder performance, and whether the business is ready to scale acquisition. At surface level, it feels as though it's a simple metric, when in reality it isn't. And here's the problems. When you look at the close rate without looking at the sales environment around it, the metric and KPI in isolation lacks significant context, which can then lead to loads of bad sales decisions, bad hires, you name it, okay? For example, a 60% close rate from warm referrals, it's not the same as a 60% close rate from cold paid traffic. A founder closing inbound prospects is not the same as a new salesperson closing colder leads. A high-ticket offer sold with financing is not the same as the same offer sold without financing. A prospect who has consumed your content for 6 months is not the same as someone seeing the business for the first time. The number itself may be identical, but the meaning behind the number is not. Now, to show you how the severity of how close rates can be inflated, when I was assisting our new COO in hiring a CSM, we interviewed like tons of candidates who supposedly closed north of $5 million in cash. Yet the same candidates on the interview, they were struggling to put a sentence together and speak with full confidence and answer basic questions. Therefore, when we were hiring, this is a prime example, we missed context behind the numbers at hand. Because I was looking at the hiring sheet, I'm like, wow, this is great. The pool of candidates we have is amazing. When we interviewed them, it was absolute dross. And that's because we were missing the context behind these, because every number has context. Everyone can look good on paper. What's happening beyond the paper itself, okay? Now, here's how founders miscontextualize close rate. You'll probably be reading it as if it's a clean verdict on the salesperson, the offer, wherever it may be, without factoring in other factors which play a significant part. These can consist of different things, such as lead temperature. Are they cold leads? Are they warm leads? Are they hot leads? Because each one carries a different level of trust and urgency. Lead source, referrals, inbound content, paid traffic, outbound, partnerships. They aren't equal sales environments. Seller identity. My OCD is kicking off because I've got no idea why the bullet points aren't there. But seller identity. Founder-led sales often carry trust, authority, and the nuance that a hired salesperson can't instantly replicate, okay? Financing. That alone increases conversion by reducing immediate payment friction, which is a significant thing, especially in B2C. Offer maturity. A clear, proven, specific offer will usually sell differently from a flexible, still evolving offer. Brand trust. If the prospect already trusts the brand, part of the sale happened before the call. Market urgency. Prospects in urgent pain behave differently from prospects who are curious but not compelled, okay? It's kind of like, how can I put this? If you've got like knee pain, but it's not of significance, you're not really going to go pay someone to fix it, right? Because again, you can hold strong and, do yourself some justice. You can do some home remedies and whatnot. If your knee's broken, you'll crawl to the bloody hospital with whatever credit cards you actually have, okay? So that's the point when it comes to market urgency. Qualification strictness, a high close rate may simply reflect that weak fit prospects are filtered before the calls. Now, again, none of these factors are bad. They just need to be understood so that you have context around your close rate. Therefore, it allows you to assess things with a clear lens. So how do you actually look at close rate then? So look, close rate should never be reviewed as one blended number only. It should be segmented by the following: lead source, referral close rate versus inbound content versus paid traffic versus organic versus whatever else. Segment by seller, founder close rate versus rep close rate. This is super basic to do on the relevant sheets and the CRMs. Lead temperature, cold versus warm versus hot prospects, payment round, financing and non-financing. I can't stress to you enough how many people look way better than they actually are just because of financing. Like, financing is a crutch. At Imperium, because the business was registered in the UK, we didn't really have that many financing opportunities available to us. And therefore, our closers, I can name you, I've had the privilege of working with like 30 closers across the 4 years that I've had. I could name you off the top of my head 10 to 15 closers who are top elite closers because they've literally had to scrape their balls through glass to get the job done, purely because financing wasn't in place. They actually had to sell and do what they needed to do to, help people, break those financing objections and whatnot. So yeah, it's a different ball game when you're a closer that's heavily reliant on financing and when you're not. Offer type, core offer, segmented by offers as opposed to upsells, as opposed to bespoke, okay? Qualification level, qualified versus looser bookings, market stage as well. Is it early stage novelty driven demand as opposed to mature objection heavy demand? Okay. So that's essentially how to look at close rate. And when you start looking at it in this manner, you'll no longer look at it in isolation. You'll realize there's layers to it, and therefore you can make more accurate decisions. Next metric at hand. Pipeline value. Guys, just a caveat. If you see the video pausing and unpausing and it looks like there's cuts, that's because I take a sip of water after we finish each section as it's getting quite beefy. Now, pipeline value, the estimated value of potential deals currently in progress, which only becomes useful when each opportunity is qualified, weighted, and tied to a realistic probability of closing, okay? The purpose behind this is to essentially understand whether future revenue is genuinely secure or whether the business is counting optimistic possibilities as commercial reality. Now, the reason why this matters is because pipeline influences forecasting, hiring, cash planning, delivery capacity, founder confidence, and even team pressure, okay? It's comforting because it gives you as the founder something to point at. When it looks full, the future feels safer, hiring feels easier to justify, spending feels less risky, and the team feels like it has momentum. But a CRM can make the month look much safer than it actually is, and your sales manager, be it in-house or fractional, can make things look way better than they actually are, okay? Pipeline is not revenue. It's possibility. It's not proof, okay? Some of that possibility is real. Some of it's weak. Some of it's stale. Some of it is poorly qualified. Some of it is based on interest rather than intent. Some of it's commercially exciting and not decision ready. Some of it is filled with people who like the idea but do not have the urgency, budget, authority, or timing. I hope by this point you're seeing how these metrics are skewed, okay, or can be skewed if you don't apply context. Now, with pipeline specifically, this is how you would typically miscontextualize it. You look at TPV and you'll treat it like future revenue. They'll say, or you'll say, we have 300K in the pipeline, as if that means the business has 300K likely to land. The better question to ask is, how much of this pipeline is qualified, urgent, decision ready, cash capable, and actually moving, okay? It's because a 300K pipeline, it may really contain 50K of high probability opportunity, 75K of possible opportunity, and 175K of optimistic noise, okay? That difference matters, especially if you as the founder is about to hire, spend, or forecast from it. Now, here are the different pipeline layers and what you as a founder should check. Fit. Does the prospect match the type of client the business can serve profitably and effectively? Need. Is there a real problem or only general curiosity? Urgency. Is there a reason to act now? Authority. Are you speaking with the decision maker or number 2, number 3, number 4? Cashability. Can they afford the offer under the required terms? Decision stage. Are they exploring, evaluating, verbally committed or contract ready? Momentum. Is the deal moving forward or has it stalled? Age. How long has the deal been sitting in the pipeline? Why do founders do this? So they'll overtrust their pipeline because it reduces anxiety. Okay. It gives them a sense that the future revenue is already forming, and it allows them to believe that the next month or quarter is safer than it may actually be. It creates emotional certainty before commercial certainty exists. Now, I'll give you a real life example here. Now that I've started my own consulting business, right, where it's just me, myself, and I have so many opportunities in the quote unquote pipeline that's in my head. But because I'm aware of all these different things, I have no emotional attachment to the opportunities and the numbers next to it because they're meaningless. Okay. They're absolutely meaningless. If I wanted to feel better about myself, then I'll say, yeah, got like 10 deals in the pipeline, blah, 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 it's meaningless until we get to the finish line, which is cash in my bank. Okay. So pipeline, again, if I wanted to make myself feel better, I tell myself, yeah, it's full and blah, 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 but I don't really allow myself to get emotionally attached to that. But with a lot of founders, it's normal because again, it reduces anxiety. And they also lack the awareness behind this stuff. So again, if you only know how to view your pipeline one way, then you're only going to view it one way. Okay. This is really common. Like when you want to justify a decision that you already want to make. So then you believe your pipeline and you believe it's accurate when it's not. Okay. And you're just buying into the dream. You want to hire, therefore pipeline becomes proof. You want to scale ads, so pipeline becomes confidence. You want to forecast a bigger month, so pipeline becomes evidence. That's not always deliberate. It's just what happens when a founder wants the business to feel safer than it currently is. The problem is that a pipeline should not be used to reassure the founder. It should be used to reveal probability, risk, and next action. Now, here's how to actually look at the pipeline. It should be weighted, aged, and qualified, and you can do this by having the appropriate views listed below. Total pipeline, maximum possible opportunity, but not the expected outcome. Qualified pipeline, the portion that actually fits your criteria. Weighted pipeline, realistic value after probabilities applied. Aged pipeline, the portion that may be stale, delayed, or inflated. Cash capable pipeline, the portion that can realistically pay on your terms. A good practical fix that founders can implement immediately is to create a simple pipeline quality value, allowing you to have more of an accurate representation of your pipeline. So below is an example, okay? Deal, value, stage, fit, urgency, authority, cashability, probability, next action. Do not make hiring or spending decisions from TPV alone, okay? Make them from qualified, weighted, and decision-ready pipeline views, because it should allow you to, create informed preparation and not emotional certainty. Emotional certainty is meaningless, guys, honestly, because you buy into the belief that you're going to finish on the cash being collected and you're going to get a ton of deals. It's just not the case. So that's how to actually view your sales pipeline. And you really want to factor this in, especially if you've got like a sales team or sales has been outsourced, especially on a fractional basis, because they'll try to pull a fast one on you and say, yeah, we got tons of deals in the pipeline. It's definitely coming. That's meaningless. Like, what's it actually look like? And look at the numbers behind the numbers. Next one, churn and retention. This is again funny one because I was literally discussing this with a client, or potential client, I may add. What'd you call it? When was it? Yesterday or something. But yeah, we were looking at how the metrics were skewed. But again, that's a separate story, and we can relate it to this. This is the rate at which clients, accounts, or revenue leaves the business over a period of time, okay? Retention is the rate at which clients, accounts, revenue stays within the business over a period of time, okay? The purpose, understand whether clients are leaving, staying, or renewing for the reasons you think they are. Why this matters: churn and retention influence offer decisions, delivery changes, client success priorities, sales messaging, hiring, and growth confidence, okay? Churn's one of the easiest metrics to overreact to, because if churn increases, founders often assume the service is not good enough, just like the client I was speaking to yesterday, because they're assuming the service was wrong when it wasn't. It was literally it was just the client not being, holding themselves accountable and doing the actual work required. If retention is strong, you assume clients are happy. If renewals are high, you assume offers valuable. If clients leave, you assume delivery failed. Sometimes that's true, but more often than not, the real cause is more specific. Churn tells you that a client left, it doesn't tell you why. Retention tells you that a client stayed, it doesn't tell you why, okay? Now here's how founders typically miscontextualize churn and retention, okay? You as a founder will look at it and you'll treat churn as if you received a final verdict, but it can come from many different places. I also had this from someone else in my network where she was asking me, because she was about to scale up the ads for one of our clients, and she wanted to understand what a good churn rate is, which is, again, for context, is sub 10%. But even beyond that, right, it can be north of 10%. But then the context, you need to apply the context. How much of those are actual valid churns that are north of 10%? But long story short, right, when you actually get a final verdict on the churn, then you can actually scale it accordingly. Now, these are different things that you actually want to look at. Client leaves early, you interpret it at a surface level that the service failed, but then an example of how to interpret it, they may have been a poor fit client. They may have badly been onboarded. They may have been missold or not ready to implement. We've churned so many clients where it's like, you know, they either weren't ready to implement, or, for example, maybe they were just a poor fit. In some cases, they were even missold, to which the sales rep had to be held accountable for. The client does not review. You'd assume the offer lacks value. They may have just achieved the outcome, lost urgency, lacked budget, or never understood the next value layer. Retention's high. Clients are happy. They may be happy, but they may also be, you know, dependent, locked in, unsure what else to do, or slow to evaluate the value that they've just had from the program. Another thing is that, you know, another thing to actually note here is the topic of silence. Just because someone's silent doesn't mean they're happy. So we found this ourselves, especially when I was, you know, overseeing account recovery, and I was also assisting in renewals and whatnot. Some clients who didn't speak for months, they didn't kick up a fuss whatsoever. At the time of the renewal and, you know, offboarding and whatnot, all of a sudden they'll just drown you with complaints. So don't fall into the trap in assuming that silence is success. It isn't. Churn is low. So this is where the model is stable. At least you'd assume so. But then a better interpretation is that the stability may be real, or may be protected by, you know, the contract terms, the founder relationship, or even just switching friction. And by switching friction, it's just coming up with variables to reduce the level of friction that's been had for a specific client. So for example, adjusting their payment plan, giving them a delay, adjusting deliverables to suit their narrative, all these different things. Refunds increase. Again, you'd assume the product's broken. Issue comes from so many different things: sales expectation, buyer quality, payment pressure, onboarding delay. So, and in my experience, again, from leading account recovery and dealing with all these fires, nonsensical refund claims, you don't want to factor them into churn because they just hold no weight. Like, it just comes from the customer just making something up or trying to pull a fast one, which we've had plenty of times. Now, the mistake you can make here is changing the business before you understand why clients actually left, like the example I gave, okay? The reason why founders do this is they misread churn because churn feels personal. When client leaves, it feels like rejection, and therefore it triggers panic, defensiveness, and overcorrection. And this part is hilarious because I'm probably going to send this section of the video, to my good friend who I was speaking to about this the other day, as it relates straight to him. You may immediately want to change the offer, add more deliverables, blame delivery, blame sales, blame the client, or rebuild the client success process, okay? But churn needs investigation before action. Otherwise, you as the founder end up fixing the most visible problem, not the real one, okay? This needs to be, I need to boldify this, like, the most visible problem does not mean that it's the most real one. Super important to actually note here. If the real issue is poor fit clients, improving delivery will not fully fix it. Okay. If the issue is expectation setting, adding more features will increase workload without solving the root problem. If the issue is onboarding, changing the offer may create unnecessary complexity. If the issue is cash pressure, the product may not be the problem at all. Now, here's how you actually want to look at churn. It should be segmented by source, client type, stage, reason, and timing. So when we were doing our offboardings, for example, for our clients, we eventually got to the point where we were asking for reasoning and we were tracking it accurately, because then it was like a feedback loop on improving the product at hand, as opposed to just winging it, which is what we were doing like 4 years ago, which again is not bad. It's bad. I was about to say it's not bad. It is bad, but it's not the end of the world because we were tracking it as a basic level. But now it's a lot more advanced. At least at the time of me leaving it as it was set up was. So here are the different questions you want to ask yourself here. Which clients are leaving? And this reveals whether churn is concentrated in a specific segment. Where did they come from? It reveals whether certain lead resources produce weaker fit clients. What were they promised? Whether expectation setting created the issue. When did they disengage? This reveals whether the problem sits in onboarding, delivery, value realization, or renewal. Did they achieve a meaningful milestone? This reveals whether value was delivered clearly enough. Were they actually a good fit client? This reveals whether sales qualification needs tightening. Why are retained clients staying? This reveals whether retention is driven by value dependency, contract lock-in, or founder relationship, okay? The practical fix behind this, guys, is essentially, creating a churn reason review before making changes. And then you want to use the following categories. This is kind of what we've used. Poor fit, expectation mismatch, onboarding failure, value realization issue, delivery quality issue, cash external issue, completion outcome achieved, which is a good one because it's like, if you fix the problem, job done. If you don't have an upsell, what can you do, right? When I say what can you do, you can make an upsell. But again, if you don't have an upsell at the time, there's not much you can do. Relationship communication issue, all these different things, okay? Use these categories. Key thing to remember, churn tells you something that has happened. It does not tell you what has caused it. So guys, if you're scaling up, I guarantee you're going to start getting people, saying they want to leave, they need a refund and blah, 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 blah. Then what's going to happen is you're going to enter an emotional state because you as a founder are a leader, or you should be a leader, and you have a sense of accountability and standards within you. You're going to blame yourself. You're going to have sleepless nights thinking, oh my God, my product's bad. It's my fault, blah, blah, blah. Come and speak to me. Give me context on these refund requests and fires. And I can almost guarantee you 7 to 8 times out of 10, it's not you. It's not your product. It's a problem to do with the client that's out of your control. And this is based off of, again, dealing with hundreds and hundreds of these people. Okay. I literally done this yesterday with a conversation that I had with a friend / potential client to be, that I'll reference throughout this video. So remember that. Next one, gross margin and profit. Gross margin is the percentage of revenue left after the direct cost of delivering the service, has been removed. Okay. The profit, the money left after the wider cost base of the business has been accounted for, including team, tools, management load, rework, operational drag, all that stuff, okay? The purpose, understand whether the business model is actually profitable or whether profit is being created by hidden founder labor and undercosted delivery. Now, the reason why this matters is because margin influences pricing, delivery design, hiring, capacity planning, founder pay, growth confidence, and whether you can actually scale without breaking, okay? This is one of the most misleading metrics in service-based businesses because the real costs often sit inside you. A business can appear profitable because you're still absorbing work that should eventually be carried out by the relevant operating model. You're checking quality, you're fixing delivery mistakes, you're handling difficult clients, you're making judgment calls, you're remembering details that the system didn't capture, you're training the team informally, you're rescuing timelines, you're absorbing emotional load, you're filling gaps between people. You are doing everything. And if this is you, DM me. And that's a shameless plug. On paper, right, the margin looks healthy, but in reality, you're quietly paying for the model with time, judgment, stress, and rescue work. Now, this is how founders miscontextualize margin. You would often read margin as proof that the delivery model works. You assume that if your business has a 30 to 40% gross margin, the model is healthy enough to scale, but that margin may not include the full cost of delivery. What is almost always missed are the hidden costs. Founder quality control. Delivery appears consistent because you catch the issues before the client sees them. Founder delivery rescue. Work appears profitable because you absorb unplanned effort. Client communication load. Account management effort is underestimated. Rework. Mistakes are fixed informally, so true delivery cost is hidden. Management load. Team coordination, training, and decision making are not properly accounted for. Tooling and process gaps. The business relies on manual work where systems should exist. Underpaid founder role. Profit exists partly because you are simply not paying yourselves the market cost of a replacement, which then translates to you're basically not paying yourself enough. And I've seen this happen so many times. Okay. Now, the reason you do this is because you are used to being the shock absorber. So this is what typically happens from 1 to 30K, where even if you build a lifestyle-based business through the lens of an operator, where it's fully systemized and whatnot, you're used to dealing with all the problems, you're used to dealing with everything. And you've been carrying so much complexity for so long that it feels perfectly normal to you, okay? Therefore, you don't always count your own involvement as a cost because you see it as a part of being the founder. You also often underestimate the cost of replacing your judgment, quality control, and client relationship management. This right here is an illusion that many of you fall prey to. It looks profitable while you're carrying it, but it may look very different once the business has to pay for that work properly. Now, here's how to actually look at margin. The correct question when you're looking at margin isn't only are we profitable, it's would we still be profitable if the founder were paid properly and replaced operationally. This is a different ball game. Your margin should always be adjusted for the following things. Founder delivery time. It shows whether your delivery is truly team-led. Founder management time. It shows whether the team can operate without constant founder input. Rework and correction. It shows the cost of weak process or quality control. Client escalation time. It shows whether account management is underbuilt. Future hires required. It shows whether current profit survives the next stage. Tooling and systems required. It shows whether operations need investment before scale. The practical fix is for you to run a founder subsidy check to get a clear view on the current state of your margin and how it should be adjusted. You would do this by answering these following questions, okay? And these are just some of the key questions to ask. What delivery work am I still doing? What quality control do I personally provide? What client issues can only I personally resolve? What decisions still depend on my judgment? What work would need to be hired for if I stopped doing it? What would margin look like if that work became a real cost? The key thing to remember is that profit that depends on invisible founder labor is not yet scalable profit. And therefore, you really want to actually look at your margins accordingly because it can be extremely misleading. Now, the next one up is lead volume, cost per lead, and show rate. I bunched them together because they're kind of in the same house. Not kind of, they are in the same house, and it's very easy to, batch them up together. So your lead volume, number of prospects entering the business, cost per lead, average costs, to generate a lead essentially. Show rate, the percentage of book calls or appointments to actually attend, okay? And the purpose behind this is to understand whether lead generation is creating real commercial opportunity or it's just more activity at the top of the funnel. The reason this matters, lead volume, CPO, and show rate, it influences ad spend, setter targets, sales capacity, calendar planning, and the founder's belief, your belief that demand is increasing. This is where you get caught. More leads feel like more opportunity. A lower CPL feels like marketing's working. A full calendar feels like demand is strong. And if enough people are booking calls, it's easy to assume the acquisition system is starting to prove itself. But a busy funnel is not the same as a healthy funnel. Cheap lead is not automatically a good lead. Booked call is not automatically a serious buyer. A high show rate is not automatically proof of demand if the people showing up are still poor fit, low urgency, or not cash ready. The real question is not, are we getting leads? The real question is, are these leads moving through the business in a way that creates cash retention and delivery quality clients, okay? And the way founders miscontextualize this is that they judge acquisition too early in the funnel. They look at the cost per lead, the number of book calls, or the show rate, and they decide whether, marketing is working based off of that before they actually check what those leads become. That is dangerous because top of funnel activity can make business feel busier while the commercial quality is quietly getting worse. Now, here are the different metrics, right, that you can look at here and the interpretations behind each one that you may have and the interpretation you should have. High lead volume, okay? You interpret it as demand is being strong. Better interpretation, the market may be curious but not necessarily ready or able to buy. Low cost per lead, marketing is efficient. Cheap leads may be low intent, poor fit, or expensive to convert. More book calls, sales opportunities increasing. Booking quality may be decreasing. I can't tell you the amount of times we've had to deal with this where calendars were stacked, but the reps were going through hell. And again, as I mentioned, they were scraping their balls through glass. And I do apologize that I give you that vulgar description of that, but that's just to show you the severity of the situation at hand and how difficult calls can be and what happens when you just look at, metrics on a surface level. Strong show rate. Prospects are committed. They may be attending, but they're still not qualified, urgent, or ready to buy. Weak show rate. Reminder process is broken. The real issue, however, it may be that there's low intent, poor qualification, or weak perceived value. More inquiries. You may think the offer's resonating. The message may be, but when in reality, the message may be attracting broad interest rather than qualified buyers. Okay. Now, this is why you need to read all the metrics. You need to read it together, basically. If the leads are cheap but do not show, the issue is not just reminders. If calls show but do not qualify, the issue is not just sales. If calls qualify but do not close, the issue may be offer fit, urgency, proof, pricing, trust, or cash capacity. You don't want a funnel that only looks good at the top. You want a funnel where quality survives the journey from lead to cash. Now, here's why founders do this, okay? You do this because lead numbers are emotionally reassuring. When the business feels quiet, more leads feel like progress. When the calendar fills up, the founder feels momentum. When cost per lead drops, you feel like marketing is becoming efficient. And to be fair, those can be good signs, but not proof on their own. And that's why, again, you can't read metrics in isolation. The problem is that acquisition metrics are easy to count before they are easy to trust. It's much simpler to celebrate more leads than it is to inspect whether those leads were qualified, serious, cash capable, and likely to become strong clients. This is also why show rate belongs inside the acquisition conversation rather than a separate obsession. If the wrong people are booking, if the offer is unclear, if the call does not feel valuable, or if the lead source is low intent, reminder sequences alone will not fix it. Now, here's how to actually look at acquisition quality. Do not evaluate lead source performance only by CPL or volume. Evaluate it by lead to cash quality. So here are the different layers on what to check. Lead volume, how many people entered. Lead source, where did they come from and how much trust or intent already existed. Qualification rate, how many were actually a good fit. Show rate, how many were serious enough to attend. Offer rate, how many were appropriate to pitch. With this, I'm not a fan of this because, to be transparent, everyone that shows up to your call, 99% of the time, you should be giving an offer. But if you're in a spot where your offer rate is low, then you've been put in a bad position as a closer, or your closer's been put in a bad position because there's a problem with the leads that are getting on the call. Okay. Close rate. How many people became clients? Cash collected. How much real cash came from the source? Retention, refund risk. Did those clients stay, succeed, and fit delivery? This gives you a much cleaner read on whether a channel is actually worth scaling, okay? Because a lead source that looks expensive at the top may be strong if it produces serious buyers, clean closes, good cash collection, and low churn. A lead source that looks cheap at the top may be weak if it fills the calendars with poor fit conversations and downstream delivery problems, okay? The practical fix behind this is when you're reviewing acquisition performance, you want to stop asking yourself stop asking this question only, where it goes, how many leads did we get and how much did they cost, which unironically is two questions, but it's asked in the same sentence here. You want to ask these following questions instead. How many leads came in? Where did they come from? How qualified were they? How many booked? How many showed? How many were actually appropriate to pitch? How many closed? How much cash was collected? Did those clients retain, succeed, and fit the business? Did the source create margin or just activity? Key thing to remember is this: cheap leads are expensive if they do not show qualify, convert, retain, or fit the business. So when you're actually looking at leads and just the show rate and all these different things when it comes to volume, make sure you take everything in context here. Otherwise, it could be skewed, and that's why these metrics in particular, where I batch these 3 in one here, it can be quite detrimental to your business if you make decisions off of them without looking at it in its full form. TPM, Team Performance Metrics Deep Dive. The numbers used to judge how well a person, role, or team's performing, which only becomes useful when you judge it alongside the inputs, systems, expectations, and the conditions surrounding the performance. Okay. The purpose behind this is to understand whether performance belongs to the person, the system, or the environment that enabled the result here. Now, the reason this matters is because metrics influence hiring, firing, promotion, compensation, management decisions, and founder expectations. A person can look excellent in one business and very average in another, and I've seen this to be the case. That does not always mean the person changed. It may mean the environment changed. This is especially important when hiring salespeople, setters, account managers, delivery leads, or operators, okay? A salesperson, for example, they may have produced excellent numbers in a company with warm leads, strong brand trust, clear qualification, financing, a strong proof, and a mature offer. But then they join a business with cold leads, weak positioning, no financing, messy handoffs, and an unclear offer. Their performance drops. I'll give you a real example of this where Imperium, the closers that succeeded here, the ones that, closed from the ground up, funny enough, the best performers were always the ones that, joined the company as their first gig. They used to closing cold leads. They are used to, having to actually sell and, build a connection on the call and break limiting beliefs. We've also had closers who'd come from like a B2B offer where financing is in place, where it's a two-call close setup. There's not necessarily pressure-based sales where you hold someone ransom or, you go in Anaconda device mode trying to attack objections and whatnot. And as a result, it's a completely different dynamic and they're not used to closing how they were once used to. Okay. Therefore, their performance drops when they enter this new company. And you as a founder, you'd say, man, they look good on paper, but they can't perform here. Maybe that's true, but it may also be that you as a founder bought the CV number without buying the environment that created it, i.e. 5 million in cash collected, only not to be able to string a sentence together with full confidence. And I've seen that firsthand. Now, this is how you miscontextualize team performance, because you often give too much credit or blame to the person and not enough attention to the environment around them. So these are the different performance metrics you can look at here. High sales close rate. This may hide, and these are the different things it can hide. It can hide warm leads, financing, strong brand, founder-created trust, or even strict qualification. High setter booking volume, low qualification standards, or weak calendar quality. We had a guy managing Instagram before he actually became a closer. And on Instagram, he was ripping appointments. Like he was putting up record numbers, but to no fault, it was to no fault of his own. It was not his fault whatsoever, because we didn't have qualification parameters in place. Every single lead from Instagram stunk. So on paper, it's amazing, but on the back end, from a conversion standpoint, these leads were absolute dross. Okay. Strong delivery output. What it may hide: clear briefs, easy clients, mature processes, or heavy manager support. High retention under an account manager. What this may hide: contract lock-in, or what it may hide. Contract lock-in, the founder relationship, or low client expectations. Fast track completion. Maybe the work was simple. Maybe there was a low quality threshold, or maybe as a result, there's a hidden rework that you need to redo the work again later down the line. Previous leadership success. They may hide the fact that the previous environment was more mature. There was a stronger team there, a clearer operating system. Okay. Like I'll give you an example here. Like if there's a leader in corporate, that leader has evolved in a controlled environment and a structural environment where there's been intentional training and investment poured into that individual to become the leader that they become. Then when they enter like the wild west of info, it's a completely different lay of the land, where that leader, to actually perform here, they may need to communicate in a completely different manner. They may need to handle things in a completely different manner, as opposed to the structure that they were used to in a more corporate company, because the leader in info is top dog now. Whereas a leader in a corporate company, depending on position, they were like just a leader and there were like 50 leaders above them. So it's a very different, system than a very different setup, which I've been able to witness across various companies. Now, the reason founders, misinterpret team performance metrics is because at the end of the day, hiring requires confidence. You want to believe that a strong number from another environment will transfer into your own business. You look at previous performance and assume it proves capability. But here's the thing. Performance is partly personal and partly contextual. A capable person still needs the right environment, input, standards, process, offer, market, and management rhythm to produce strong outcomes. Okay. So for example, when I joined Imperium 4 years ago, there was already a foundational infrastructure in place for me to succeed with basic SOP support, all these different things. Okay. If there wasn't, I would have to learn operations and all these different things from scratch. My experience prior to, an operations manager, I was running an agency for 4 years, unsuccessfully, transparently. It was a team of me, myself, and I, the dream team per se. And, it wasn't the best, but I had significant experience in the internet marketing, info space, agency verbiage, all that stuff. So that by the time I got the role of an operations manager at Imperium, it was the reason why I was able to pick it up so easily was not because of my previous experience, which helped, but it was because there were already basic SOPs in place. Okay. Now here's how to actually look at team performance. Okay. When you're reviewing someone's previous or current performance, ask these questions. What input were they given? And the reason it matters is because performance depends heavily on lead quality, client quality, and task quality. What support existed around them? Did they have a strong manager? Did they have a process? Or was there a brand that carried part of the result? What was the market environment? Some roles are easier when demand is warm or urgent. I'm going to give you a good example here. I've got a friend, for example, he's got an AI-based sales rep offer where he places sales reps in AI companies. He's hired a recruiter. That recruiter may look like he's doing a wonderful job on paper, getting all these opportunities for his clients. In reality, it's just the industry that's doing the heavy lifting. A true mark of a great recruiter is someone who's able to secure jobs in a very, number one, competitive market, which AI is, but in their specific, segment, it isn't. But number two, also in difficult markets as well. How mature was the offer or process? Mature systems create cleaner performance conditions. That's why it matters. What changed when performance dipped? The issue may be environmental, but not purely personal. Okay. Now, the practical fix that you as a founder can take here when you're hiring or evaluating team members is to separate the following. Person capability. Look at the skills, judgment, attitude, experience, input quality. Look at the leads, clients, briefs, tasks. Look at the operating environment, the systems, the standards, the management, the process. Look at the market conditions, demand, urgency, trust, competition. Look at the support structure, training, feedback, tools, leadership. The key thing to remember here, performance does not transfer cleanly unless the conditions that supported the performance are understood. Okay. Now, the next stage here, or the next thing to look at, is actually not a metric. We've actually finished all the metric deep dives. And we've gone on to the final thing I actually wanted to look at. And I did not title this metric deep dive because this isn't necessarily a metric, but it's extremely important to look at. Early demand and the romantic stage. This can make or break your internal perception of how good you currently are. And then when you come back down to reality down the line, you can really have an identity crisis and you can really have like imposter syndrome, and mentally it could be very detrimental if you're not aware of this. Okay. So when we look at early demand, we're looking at the initial level of interest, attention, buying activity, or traction a business sees when an offer, category, or founder or a founder message starts gaining momentum. So for example, we start looking at for example, this actually brings me on to the romantic stage, which you already mentioned. So for example, when we look at the romantic stage, this is the early market stage where buyers can be unusually excited, forgiving, and easy to convert because the offer feels new, timely, novel, and founder-led. The purpose behind understanding this is you want to understand whether early traction is durable validation or temporarily inflated by novelty, timing, founder reputation, or market generosity. The reason this matters is because early demand influences offer confidence, hiring, acquisition spend, delivery, pricing decisions, founder belief, your belief that the model's broken, okay, or proven, sorry. Early demand can be intoxicating, and this is one of the easiest stages to misread because everything feels like confirmation. People buy quickly, content lands quickly, referrals happen naturally, prospects seem excited, offer feels obvious, clients are more forgiving, sales calls feel easier, founder feels like the market is pulling the business forward. Sometimes that is real validation. But sometimes the business is just in what I would call the romantic stage. I wouldn't even call it this. I personally would call it honeymoon stage. There's a wonderful marketer called Alan Sultanich that he made an article around this where it really opened my eyes around this specific stage. He labeled it as a romantic stage, which again, you can also mirror it as you can also blend it as the honeymoon stage. Just pick your verbiage, right? But again, it's similar to what tends to happen when you get into a relationship. It's all green lights until the honeymoon phase is over, okay? Once that, phase is over, people stop buying and whatnot. People start asking questions. People start having doubts around your market. The cost per lead goes up. Your CPMs goes up. Ad metrics skew, close rate skews. All these different things happen, okay? That's why in the context of business, the romantic stage is the early period where the market is unusually receptive, excited, or forgiving because the offer feels new, timely, personal, scarce, or highly relevant, okay? Again, say you meet someone who's used to seeing so many boring guys and whatnot, and then you instill a level of excitement into their lives, guess what? Of course they're going to buy into you early stages. But then when they get to know you and you go past that romantic and honeymoon phase, they're going to start asking questions, and then their perception of you is going to be skewed down the line because that initial excitement, it no longer exists, okay? I'm doing a horrible job in cross-referencing relationship analogies with the business analogies. I do a better job on the business side of things, but hopefully you get the analogies here because the business analogies are far more easier to, reference here. But yeah, you get the drift. We're 1 hour and a half in, so you can excuse me for this. But yeah, in this stage, the numbers can look way better than the operating model actually is. And I've seen this with, again, someone else I'm speaking to at this moment in time because they're doing way better than they think they're doing way better than they actually are, okay? Now, here's how you miscontextualize demand, okay? You often treat it as proof that the business is ready to scale, but early traction may be inflated by conditions that won't last. A romantic stage signal. Yeah, these are the different romantic stage signals, all right, and why it can be misleading. People buy quickly. Speed may come from novelty, urgency, or founder trust. Close rates high. The buyers may be warm, pre-sold, or excited by timing. But the content performs well. Curiosity may be high, but curiosity is not the same as buying depth. Clients are forgiving. Early adopters may tolerate more friction than later buyers. Referrals happen naturally. Early enthusiasm may not continue once the market becomes familiar or saturated. Offer feels obvious. The founder may be riding a trend, category grab, or temporary timing advantage. You see how all these things can be misleading when you're in the early stage of your market. Now, the reason why you misread early demand is because it feels like, the market has spoken based off of the initial traction you gain. It's easy to believe the model is proven when buyers are saying yes. It's easy to assume the offer will continue converting the same way. It's easy to hire, spend, and expand from the belief that the current level of demand is durable, but the market often becomes less forgiving over time. Buyers become more discerning, competitors appear, objections increase, proof requirements rise, novelty wears off, warm audiences get exhausted, referrals slow down, prospects need more education. The founder can no longer rely on excitement alone. At this point, metrics can dip and the founder thinks something broke, when in reality, sometimes nothing broke. The market just stopped being as generous. Now, here's how to actually look at early demand. It should be tested for durability. Keep this in mind when you're actually looking at these questions. Are they still converting outside the warmest audience? This then tests whether demand exists beyond early believers. Does the offer convert without founder proximity? This then tests whether message and proof carry without personal trust. Do clients succeed after buying? This then tests whether the demand is matched by delivery value. Does the model work when buyers ask harder questions? This then tests whether the offer can survive a more mature market. Can the business generate demand repeatedly? This then tests whether traction is systematic or timing driven. Now, the practical fix behind this is before scaling from early demand, you want to validate it across harder conditions. Sell beyond the warmest audience. Track close rate by lead source. Test whether the demand still holds without your involvement. Measures client success and retention, not just sales. Watch whether objections can increase as market sophistication rises. Avoid building fixed overhead from romantic stage numbers alone. This is the worst, okay? I've seen someone just pour into like team members and all these different things, but now the romantic stage is phasing, meaning that they actually have to be intentional with the structure of the business and how they do ads. Key thing to remember is early traction does not always mean the model is proven. Sometimes it means the market is still being generous, okay? Now, here's where founders usually get this wrong because, even when you understand this theory that I've just told you, and the different market stages, there's still a few places it usually breaks in practice. Firstly, you track too many metrics without knowing which ones matter. The problem with this is that, you build dashboards, trackers, reports, but the numbers do not actually improve decision making. Why this happens? More data feels like more control, but if the data is not tied to decisions, it becomes noise, okay? Secondly, they treat one blended number as truth. The problem with this is that the founder looks at one close rate, one churn rate, one margin number, one pipeline total. And the reason why this happens is that blended numbers are easier to read and communicate. And the solution here is to segment the metric by source, owner, stage, client type, offer, payment route, or market conditions. So now what we are going over here, guys, is everything that we actually just covered. Just to take a quick pause, just so we actually get a pulse check. We've gone over the metric deep dives for the metrics that can cause the biggest negative impact if you misread them. And we also covered the market stage, okay? And then, like I said, when you understand the theory, and by theory, not the market stage, sorry, I completely misread that and got that wrong. I'm talking about the theory behind why metrics are lying to you. These are the different things as to why it happens, okay? So we've covered, the first two. The third reason is because you make permanent decisions from temporary conditions. The problem, you hire, increase spend, or expand capacity based on a metric that was produced by favorable conditions. This happens because momentum creates confidence and confidence creates urgency. The solution is to ask whether the metric will still hold if volume increased, or if founder involvement reduced, or if the market becomes less forgiving. Because if that metric holds, then it's more of an accurate metric to make a decision off of, as opposed to looking at in isolation. You blame people before checking the environment. So you blame your salesperson, you blame your setter, you blame your manager, you blame your delivery person, and you assume it's a people issue. This happens because performance metrics makes it easy to personalize the problem. The solution behind this is to check input quality, operating support, lead source, offer clarity, client fit, and management rhythm before reaching a conclusion. You also use metrics for reassurance instead of control, okay? The problem behind this is the founder looks for numbers that makes them feel safe rather than numbers that reveal reality. Why this happens is because of the fact that scaling is emotionally uncomfortable. The metrics can become a way to reduce anxiety, okay? It's kind of like an antidepressant. Don't have it. Solution. Use metrics to identify the risk early, not to justify what you already want to believe. Now, before we get into, how to review these metrics moving forward, really feel free to pause the video and really look at the different metrics in question, the ones that can cause the most harm here to you when you're making decisions, and look at the decisions you've already made in the past and ask yourself, was it done by looking at the metric in isolation, or did you miss context? Because there's a chance that you may need to reverse engineer some decisions, unless it's extremely severe, as you may have miscontextualized these metrics in question, okay? Now, where we want to look at now, guys, as we go through this training, and we're nearly wrapping this up, is the metric context review. So before using any metric to make a meaningful scaling decision, run it through the following review by answering these questions. What metric am I looking at? What decision am I about to make from this metric? Where did this number come from? Who or what produced it? What conditions made this result possible? What's the number not showing? Has this been segmented by source, owner, stage, or client type? Would this number hold if volume increased? Would this number hold if the founder stepped back? Would this number hold if the market became less forgiving? Is this metric strong enough to support the decision being made? This is not designed to make you slow or hesitant. It's designed to stop you from building the next stage of your business on a half truth. Because if you build the next stage of your if you build the next stage of your business on a half truth, the first stage will fall apart, and then you return to no stages. You return to no businesses. Okay. Now, some implementation rules to factor in from this training is the following, okay? And this is specifically if you want metrics to actually help as the business scales, because, I'm assuming you do, right? As it can save you a lot of money. These are the few rules worth keeping close. Separate cash from revenue. Revenue should never be reviewed without cash and collection context. At minimum, distinguish between contract value sold, cash collected, payment plan completion, expected collectible revenue, recognized revenue, and profitable revenue. All right. Segment close rate. Never treat one overall close rate as enough. Split it by lead, source, seller, financing, qualification level, lead temperature. Weight pipeline. Pipeline should be qualified, probability weighted, and aged. Do not treat total pipeline as future revenue. Diagnose churn before acting. Don't change the offer, blame delivery, or rebuild the client success process until churn has been segmented by reason, source, timing, and client type. Adjust margin for founder labor. If you're still protecting quality, delivery, client relationships, management rhythm, the margin's not yet telling the full truth. Unless you want to be involved in everything as you scale up, I don't recommend that. Judge acquisition downstream. Don't evaluate marketing only on lead volume, cost per lead, or booked calls. Evaluate it each source by qualification, show rate, close rate, cash collected, retention, and delivery quality. And then treat performance as contextual, because when you evaluate team members, you want to separate the person's ability from the environment and the inputs and the systems around them. And be careful with romantic stage metrics. Early traction should be respected, but it should not be trusted. Validate whether the demands holds beyond novelty, founder proximity, warm audiences, and timings. Now, what this prevents is, reading metrics with context. It will prevent all these different things. And these are just a few of the significant things it prevents. And it will, again, save you a lot of money here. It prevents you from hiring from false confidence. And then you avoid building fixed costs on numbers that were not repeatable. It prevents you from scaling ads into weak demands. You avoid increasing spend before lead quality by intent downstream cash is proven. It prevents you from forecasting from unpaid revenue. You avoid treating contract value, payment plans, or invoices as cash certainty. You prevent yourself from blaming the wrong person. You avoid punishing sales, setting, or delivery when the issue is actually context. You prevent yourself from changing the wrong part of the business. You avoid rebuilding the offer when the issue is onboarding, expectation setting, qualification, or market stage. You prevent overbuilding delivery capacity. You avoid hiring or expanding around demand as not durable. You prevent mistaking early traction for proof. You avoid scaling from a romantic stage metrics before the model has been tested properly. You prevent founder anxiety. You replace vague worry with clearer interpretation and more accurate action. Okay, these are just a couple of the significant things you prevent, but long story short, you prevent yourself blowing up your business with the wrong metrics. And by wrong metrics, I mean the right numbers with the wrong context behind it. Now, the 30-day outcome based off of this training and just the principle that you can adopt moving forward, if you were to read your metrics in the manner that I've just prescribed, you just simply start making cleaner decisions. You'll know the difference between contract value sold, cash collected, and revenue that's realistically collectible after payment plan completion. You'll understand whether close rate is being driven by sales skill, lead warmth, financing, founder involvement, or market urgency. You'll identify whether pipeline is real, inflated, stale, or decision ready. You'll diagnose churn with more precision before changing the offer or blaming delivery. You'll see whether margin is genuine or being subsidized by hidden founder labor. You'll judge lead sources by downstream quality, not just cost of volume. You'll make better hiring, spend, delivery, and forecasting decisions, and you'll feel less reactive when a metric moves because you understand the likely causes behind it. The end state is not more data. The end state is better judgment under pressure. Okay. Now, here's what you should look at now that we've wrapped up the video. Finally, we got there in the end. And if you've made it this far, congratulations for putting up with my voice and not falling asleep. I would not judge you if you paused it and revisited it and, doing it that way. I'd do the exact same. By this point, the key thing you should look at moving forward is essentially looking at the metrics you rely on and questioning what created it, what is hiding, and is it enough in its current form to support any decision you're about to make. Because when you adopt this lens, you'll never fall prey to miscontextualizing metrics, and therefore you can operate with certainty. So that is pretty much it for this training, guys. Hopefully you found this video valuable. As we do an outro here, if there's anything you want covered next, leave a comment below this video. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me on Instagram. That's where I'm most active, because that's where, most of my content will be. Video cadence, it's going to be ideally once a week, depending on my brain capacity, as these trainings, they are quite beefy and it takes a decent amount of time to get the doc itself together, and then obviously get some time to do recording amidst program build, amidst the advisory work I'm doing and all that good stuff. So once a week, hold me accountable, but again, it is dependent on brain capacity. These are all the relevant socials. You can hit me up wherever, whenever. Again, IG is where I'm most prominent. And yeah, that's pretty much it for the training. We'll catch you in the next one. Cheers, guys. Bye.